a third of the world's carbon footprint or greenhouse gas emissions comes from industry, people who produce things. So if you are able through technology to impact just 1 percentage point positively in that, you avoid 70 million tons of CO2 emissions.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Learning from Leaders. Today, I not only have the pleasure to welcome Peter Vanham to the screen, but also Judith Wiese, the Chief People and Sustainability Officer of Siemens. We're all looking forward to a great conference. So without further ado, let me introduce Peter to the conference. Hi, Peter.
Well, hello. It's such a pleasure to see you again. I had the distinct pleasure myself to being in Barcelona recently, where you are and many of our students are. But I am back in Geneva, and joining me and joining all of us today from EU's third campus location, Munich, is Judith Wiese. Now, I want to obviously start and ask one of the many questions that I have for Judith, but just briefly for everyone as an introduction, Judith is indeed Chief People and Sustainability Officer at Siemens. I've been told recently that it's important to underline that this is the real Siemens. This is the Siemens AG, the largest conglomerate company in Europe, which is a source of pride for many people who work there and are associated with that company. We'll ask Siemens, we'll ask Judith, of course, about Siemens and what she does there and what the company does and what it will do in the future. But we'll also ask her all kinds of personal questions that can maybe help us as we make our way in our career, because Judith has a fantastic background at Siemens, but also at other global companies. She's been based, for example, in the Netherlands, which I'm not from the Netherlands, but I do speak Dutch. And I think Judith might speak a word of Dutch as well. I don't think we'll test it because not many other people here today, I suppose, speak Dutch. But that is Judith Wiese. She is on the board, or the executive board at least, the management board of Siemens. That's a very distinct honor to be on, and therefore it's an honor for us to speak to you, Judith. You're one of only 6, I think, members of that management board. Is that right? Is it 6?
5.
5.
We're only 5.
We're only, and that includes, so is it 6th member and the CEO, or did I just completely get it wrong?
No, we're really just 5, including the CEO.
Wow. I want to ask you then about that, because that's quite unusual. In fact, in most companies, you have a larger executive committee. It must mean, of course, that you have a very large responsibility. That's clear from your function title, because usually in many companies, Chief HR and Chief Sustainability Officers are distinct roles, and you combine the two. That's very impressive. And so without further ado, over to you, Judith. My first question, as it is a question that we ask everybody, it should be the easiest question. How are you and where are you joining us from?
I'm super duper well. I'm actually not in Munich. I am sitting in my home office in the Netherlands, and I've just come back from 4 very exciting but also exhausting days at the Hanover Fair, and that's the biggest industry fair and technology fair, and I think it's been around since 1947. And Siemens has a massive representation there. So it was really a live demonstration of how technology and sustainability go hand in hand. And we've got one of the largest, or probably the largest booth in Hanover, where we're really showcasing our technology very much to industry customers. But increasingly, and you said we're a conglomerate, we'd like to think of ourselves as one technology company. And we're trying to increasingly show what we can do for customers in certain industries across our portfolio, because we're such a large company. But increasingly, we're actually bundling and speaking the language of our customers through our technology. So that's where I'm joining from, in the home office after 4 very exciting days in Hanover.
I mean, you were very brave to call them exciting. I'm sure they must have also been exhausting, talking back to back, I suppose, to all kinds of clients. Now, I thought, Judith, that I was one of your clients because I recently bought a Siemens washing machine.
Oh dear.
But last week I was speaking to somebody that I think you know very well, Jim Snabe, a prior guest on this course as well, and he told me, Peter, I'm sorry, but no, you are not a customer of Siemens because the washing machines, the places and similar devices that people actually might know Siemens from are no longer a part of the one technology company, as you say it. They are now licensed out. So, if not from the washing machines, where would we know Siemens from? What are your customers? What are your products? Because you're a huge company, and nevertheless, not really a consumer company anymore.
No, that is absolutely true, and admittedly, it does get confusing for people who are not dealing with us on an everyday basis. And of course, uh, companies are much easier to understand when they have a consumer product to
Right.
offer, right? And I'm still grateful that you've decided for a Bosch Siemens device. Absolutely, you bought a good product.
Oh, thank you.
But it's simply not anything that I would have anything to do with. But maybe let me take you back. I mean, Siemens is out there for 176 years, and of course,
Wow.
we have evolved in terms of our portfolio over the years. Telecom was something that we've done at a certain point in time. Osram is a company that the light bulbs that some of you might remember. And the last big two portfolio moves that we have done is put the Siemens Healthineers on the stock market as a separate company. So that is now also DAX listed, but we still own it to 75%.
Hold
And
on,
that,
Judith.
yeah,
I have to
yeah,
stop you because, of course, for you, talking about things like DAX is, everyday parlance, but for many students, of course, it is not. Siemens is listed on the stock exchange. It is one of the
in
largest
Germany.
companies on the German stock exchange, and that exchange is called the DAX.
Exactly. And it used
And
to have 30 companies, now it's 40. And we're one of it. The Siemens Healthineers are now one of it. And the last company that we spun out and only own with a smaller percentage now is Siemens Energy. So if you're thinking big gas turbines, etc., or wind, wind turbines, that is us no longer. So the question is, who are we then, right?
that's right.
Who are we? And we are a company that today has 320,000 people, if I still count in the Healthineers, 250,000 otherwise. And we are big in industry, hence I come from Hanover, which is an industry fair. So we work with everybody around the globe who produces stuff. And whether that's discrete production like cars, yeah, you have discrete things that come off an assembly line, or whether it's the process industry, yeah, somebody who brews beer or does chemicals. The likelihood that we are in there with our technology from an automation digitalization is super, super high. The second area where we're in is anything that you get that helps you with electrification. So electrical products, electrical automation, grids. Yeah? So if you get into the question of how can we actually get more renewables into smaller grids and how can we make that stable, we're in there with our technology, with our grid technology, and the same for buildings. So we also make smart buildings because they're a big contributor from an energy consumption and carbon emissions perspective. We help with that as well. And the other thing we do is we get into mobility, either through trains or through our e-mobility portfolio around charging, etc. So here again, the gist really is we make things smarter, we connect devices, and we help the world go more efficient. That can be energy efficient, resource efficient, and of course, all of that helps in terms of sustainable outcomes as well.
Yeah, so in fact, I think somebody also told me that Siemens touches everyone and everything, which is an interesting way of putting it. But we might just not be aware of it. So, we're in a Siemens, or we're in a building with Siemens machines. We're driven around by Siemens engine trains. We have products that were produced in factories with all kinds of Siemens automating machines. Now, of course, Judith, I have to say, among our students, we've had the CEO of Manchester United, we've had the CEO of Bentley cars. Obviously, those shiny objects are a little bit more well known, but Siemens is the largest industrial or technology company, I should say, then in Europe. So it's very, very impressive. Now I want to move to what you do at Siemens.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna really try to say Siemens and not Siemens. It's very hard for me. What you do at Siemens, you're in charge of people and sustainability. So what does that actually mean concretely at a company like Siemens?
Yeah, so as we discussed before, there's 5 of us, and we all took on a larger portfolio. And the advantage of being 5 is that really, from a team perspective, there is really just one team. I mean, 7 is still a good team, 8 maybe, but the likelihood that you become 2 teams when you have a conversation is high. So I think what is really great is that we stick together and we decide everything together, and we have one conversation. And that means that all of us carry a larger portfolio. And for me, it's people, it's sustainability. I actually have the shared services organization reporting to me, as well as a number of geographies. So we also divvied up the world between us. And I always say, my countries keep me honest. Everything that we dream up in headquarters, I go to the countries and I know whether that is really happening. Now, what we do is we do strategy, obviously, together, and we follow typically a 3 to 5 year cycle. We have strategy reviews every year, where we see whether we're on track or whether we need to course correct, whether there's big disruptions. And we have made sure that both people and sustainability are squarely part of that now, which wasn't the case in the past. We've done well on people in the past. We've done well on sustainability, particularly from an own operations perspective in the past, but really anchoring both things now squarely in how we look at opportunities and challenges at Siemens is different now. And so whilst I hold up the mirror, I bring the data. We have really hardwired both the people side and the sustainability side into every core business process that there is. And if you look at our portfolio, more than 90% of our portfolio is able to impact positively on sustainability. So therefore, it cannot be something that sits on the sidelines.
Right, because that is, of course, the case in some other companies, many other companies, where it's a little bit more of a public affairs role. You're working with governments, but to convince them that yes, you're a good company, you are following, let's say, the green transition. But it's not necessarily sustainability. It's not necessarily a revenue generating aspect of the business at Siemens. I know from having interviewed you in a journalistic role that sustainability is actually, as you said, central to the Siemens business model. Could you tell us why that is the case?
Yeah, so when I came, I was really pleased to see that Siemens had been looking into sustainability for quite a few years. I mean, I think our sustainability report went out for the first time in 2008, 2010. Yeah, so we've been at this for a while. We made first declarations around own footprint as early as 2015 for a large enterprise of our size. That was a first.
Because for you, sustainability in that front, sorry to interrupt you, means that you are committed as a company to this what people call the green energy transition, that you would like to reduce your CO2 emissions. That's the footprint that you were referring to, that you become, so to speak, a clean company and that you offer clean services and products. Is that sort of what it means?
Yeah, so if I put it very simply, I can look into I can look back and see what footprint I've left. Yeah, and that means, what is my emissions? How have I maybe hampered biodiversity? Was my consumption of water? How have I left a mark on the planet that is maybe not a positive one? The thing that we're talking much more about is the handprint I can leave. So to what extent are we actually producing things and selling technology that can help the world? And when you look at things like handprints, our technology just last year abated something like 150 million tons of CO2. Yeah. So therefore there's a footprint
So
that
it
you
helped
leave
make
yourself.
sure
Yeah.
that 150 million tons of CO2 were not emitted. That's what you mean
Exactly.
by abate.
Exactly. Now, so how do you help others avoid things? I'll give you a simple example. We all live in a building. Now, spent unfortunately most of our times in buildings these days. Buildings contribute around about to 40% of energy consumption around the world.
Huge.
About 50% of that goes completely wasted because we have the lights on and the heating on or the air conditioning on when nobody's there. So if you have technology that makes buildings smarter and you can optimize for that, you can cut out easily between 20 and 50% of energy consumed. Every bit of energy that you don't consume means you also don't leave an emissions footprint. You don't emit carbon. So there's big correlations. A third of the world's carbon footprint or greenhouse gas emissions comes from industry,
right.
People who produce things. So if you are able through technology to impact just 1 percentage point positively in that, you avoid 70 million tons of CO2 emissions. So and a lot of what helps from a sustainability perspective comes through data, measurements, and then ways of improving that and using technology to do things that allow you to do more with less. And a lot of what we do, take digital twin technology, for example, allows you to design products or even production processes in the virtual world before you even touch anything in the real one. And we know today that the footprint of a product is determined to 80% in its design phase. Now, so therefore, if you are able to now design products, and we do this for ourselves, but we use that technology also for our customers, of course. If you apply technology that allows you to optimize for things like cost, quality, but also for green, then this is how we can help. And of course, the beauty is that we drink our own champagne, and right. Our products and our factories in that regard are a showcase to what we can show our customers we can do for them.
You make me think about champagne now, Judith. Now I want a glass of champagne.
I could have said medicine, but our technology doesn't hurt, and it doesn't have a bad taste to it either. So I like champagne better.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, so you have that sustainability ingrained in your business model. Maybe just a quick question as a follow-up. Like some of our students live in countries where sustainability is actually not a positive word, where people have started to believe that in fact, it's sort of it's a bad thing. That you should just do what you do and do all kinds of business activities. Don't worry about that footprint. And that economic growth is way more important than being green. Where does Siemens stand on that debate?
Well, that's obviously an easy one for me to answer, right? I mean, we have fully embraced a different philosophy, and in fairness, it's also easy for us to do that. Yeah, I mean, if you sit on a portfolio that helps rather than hinders, there is actually no conflict for us. And I think what you're alluding to is very much an American philosophy to name one big country, because they follow a different governance codex. So if you do business in America, the governance codex, the legal governance codex in America will hold you accountable to maximizing shareholder value.
Right.
The minute companies have to make choices between doing well for their shareholders, but maybe or less well for their shareholders, but better for the economy, for the planet,
the environment.
They get into a conflict now. And I think many good companies are trying to find exactly the sweet spot where you do good business, but you also do that with good practices from a planetary perspective.
Yeah,
this is less of an issue for us, but this is what some companies are faced with. But there is an economic case for sustainability, and it's becoming more and more in our faces as well as we see natural disasters. And capital markets at the end of the day are also very interested in the risk that you run with
Right.
with your operations, whether your operations are in danger because they're impacted by climate change,
Or your
or
business
whether
model.
your markets are.
Yeah.
And in many geographies, we also see regulation helping in that regard, and setting some very clear standards. So I think in sooner or later, many companies may also find themselves out of business if they are not compliant with the standards that are evolving around sustainability.
Yeah, but not Siemens. That's clear, Judith. Now, you speak in very knowledgeable ways. Of course, leading a company that's so large on a journey that's so important, sustainability. But you're also in charge of people, and people in this case means that I suppose your talent. You make sure that Siemens attracts the right talents, that it retains the right talents, and that they contribute to the Siemens mission. Why is talent management, talent retention, why is that today so strategically important for a company like Siemens?
Yeah, and before I get to the heart of your question, maybe let me do a little detour back to sustainability, because very often we think of sustainability as the E for environment, but at the end of the day, it is ESG, right? It is environment, social, and governance, and we have given ourselves our own framework in that regard, and we needed a few more letters. So ours is called degree, So D for decarbonization. Then we have ethics and governance, resource efficiency, equity as diversity, equity, and inclusion, and employability, because we wanted to make sure that whatever we do in the people space and the environmental space really does come together in one framework. So even there we have the two things completely integrated. The hats that I wear, even in the framework. Now, why is it important? Why are we talking, and why are many companies talking even more about people strategically these days than maybe ever before? One is there are many companies, and most European countries account for that, have a demographic change that we've been talking about for as long as climate change.
People are getting older.
But again, like climate change, we're now seeing it.
Yeah.
So there will be millions of people leaving the workforce in Europe. In Germany, it's 5 to 7 in the next 10 years, that are going to be really hard to replace. And Germany has a workforce of, I think, 45 million roundabout.
Wow, yeah.
If you are losing 5 to 7, then that's big. And so it's going to be harder to get people attracted. So if you thought that it's easy just to go to the market, that's an illusion. Good news for you guys, because
I was going to say,
I think anybody who is willing and able has great chances of finding a job these days. There's a great market for talent, and of course that is important for us as well. Now, Siemens, as a big company with a big brand, obviously has still has it easier than many of the small medium-sized companies to attract people, but we will also feel it sooner or later more. And so there is absolute value in making sure that the people we have today develop and do lifelong learning. And if you think about the shelf life of knowledge really tanking, particularly in technology areas, we need to make sure that people we have and want to stay, that they keep relevant over time. I don't know whether it's good news or bad news for everybody on the call, but you'll probably
I think for
have
the people
a
on the call, it's
45-year
good.
career, right? So you want to make sure that you stay relevant and that you keep learning. And this is what we want to do with our people as well. So no great technology without great people. So we're at the forefront of developing technology. We've got 1,400 AI experts. But of course, we're also internally people who consume technology and deploy technology, and we want to make sure that we invest in those out there experts, the engineers, the software developers, etc., but also in the people who are at the end of the day consumers of technology and need to keep a pace in that regard. And by the way, our customers are asking us more and more as well. They say, don't just give us the technology. Can you also help us understand what we need to do with our workforce so that they really embrace that technology well?
Yeah, and that's definitely a challenge for everybody. Like it's one thing to have the technology, it's one thing to develop the technology. It's an entirely different thing to be able to use it and to make the best of it with the people that you have. And in that regard, I guess final question on the corporate side. AI, of course, is what interests all of us. That's what we continually talk about. I'm sure that many people on the call are actually quite well advanced in having AI skills and being able to deploy the software the best possible way, maybe even code certain things. But how important is the AI for Siemens?
Yeah, AI is super important for us, and we have been doing industrial AI for 30 years. We have more than 3,000 patents in AI. We have, like I said earlier, 1,400 experts, and our AI is first and foremost industrial AI, simulation technology, something that enables computing powers, predictive maintenance, enabling autonomous driving. Enabling robots on the shop floor. That's the kind of AI that we're in. But we have partnered with people like Microsoft for the large language models now. Yeah, so the generative AI, the language AI to come in to create something that we call an industrial co-pilot. And what that basically does is if you go to a highly automated factory shop floor with robots, they typically operate literally in cages. Now robots come out of their cage because now you don't need to have coding language anymore to be able to give commands. You can actually speak. Yeah? They understand human language now if you program them for specific use cases, which means that you cut out weeks of work of coding on the shop floor. And of course, you don't need experts for everything anymore. So that's how we interact now with the generative AI that other companies like Microsoft or Google are much better than we are at in terms of creating. And what we're doing also is we're partnering with people like NVIDIA that when we do simulation, when we do take things into the virtual world for simulation of a product or a process, we can actually supercharge it with real life photographic rendering, so that it feels like you're really entering the metaverse of in an industrial context.
Wow.
So for us, it's super important, and we have lots of people who are developing and are continuing to develop AI in that context.
It's very impressive, but Judith, if your remarks about unleashing the robots from their cages was meant to, make us be impressed, yes, that worked. But I'm also very fearful now. I hope they're benign robots, the Siemens robots. Judith, can I ask you, because you're in the Netherlands now, you are obviously one of the leading women in European business. Did you always know personally that this was your destiny, that Judith Wiese was going to want to be a leading business leader in Europe?
No, I didn't. I mean, I could tell you this lovely story, yeah, because in hindsight, of course, you can talk about your CV in so many ways. No, I didn't. What I knew was when I got infected with the be abroad, see different cultures virus at the age of 16. What I knew was that I wanted to work internationally. I wanted to not sit in Germany, but be able to travel the world, work with different people. And at the time, I thought, well, I'm definitely not going to be an interpreter. So what do I combine it with? Law, economics, yeah. And I ended up studying economics. And in hindsight, I'm super happy with that choice. So I studied business, I studied HR, and a bit of law within that as well. And today, what I loved from the very beginning is that you get intellectual problems. Yeah, so you go into business and there's intellectual problems that you solve. Yeah, what's your go-to market? What's
Right.
your portfolio, etc. But I believe that at the end of the day, whether you go to a good place or a great place depends on the people, and depends on how those people come together. And I don't know how many of your students have already done internships, but you get the smell of the place pretty quickly. And you know
Right.
whether you're going into a place that has good energy, and where people actually like to be, or whether you go to a place that sucks the lifeblood out of you, or anything in between, right? And I think I have such a privilege to work in a role where I get to do both, right? I love the intellectual challenge of thinking about what that one technology company could be in 5 or 10 years' time. But I know, yeah, there's a side to it that comes with the dynamics of people,
Right.
that is just as exciting but works differently. Yeah? You have to look at how you design for that, how you design for a good organism differently than when you go to doing portfolio work.
Yeah. So you're really interested in the human intelligence and the human design. We like that. That's nice to hear that there's still that humanity focus, at the top of technology companies. Now, you actually didn't start in a technology company, did you? You worked for a very long time in the beginning of your career for Mars. In fact, I think if I read your CV correctly, that you worked at Mars for 20 years, which you did
Yeah.
is longer than some of the students that are with us have lived. Um,
Well, now you're making me feel old. That's not fair.
but then for us to understand what that means, 20 years at one company, what about a certain company culture? What about Mars? What about your stay there made you stay for such a long time?
Yeah, no, I will always be super grateful to the time that I had in Mars. It's a great.
Mars, it's the pet care company, it's the Mars bars company. We're talking about Mars,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like the Mars, the
we're talking
Snickers,
the
the
chocolate
Twix.
bars, we're talking pedigree pet foods, we're talking Wrigley's chewing gum or Uncle Ben's rice. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's Mars, about what, 120,000 people today. Yeah, probably 40 billion in turnover, maybe 50 even now. They've expanded heavily into veterinary services as well.
Yeah.
So they bought up clinics as well. Still privately owned by the Mars family, and a business that is very principled in the way that it does business. There's 5 principles that everybody knows when you wake them up at night, that are meant to guide decisions that you make, and decision dilemmas that you might have. John Mars and Forrest Mars always said, a great business is great brands and great people. So I've grown up in a business where the people function always had its seat at the table, was always deemed a co-pilot, just like finance on the other side, and was very invested in people. Therefore, a good hire was somebody that you could promote at least twice. And I think what I just loved about it is that a lot of learning happens through rotation. So I don't
Right.
think I've done a single job for 3 years in Mars, in the 19 that I was there, and I just learned so much, both through what I saw and the different perspectives onto the business. But at the same time, it was flanked with really good leadership development. So I think I've had more feedback in my life, than many, in my position in my career. And I think it's taught me a lot about, how you yourself are an instrument of change, and that at the end of the day, you start your career and you think it's about what you know. I think the higher you go, it's more about who you are, and whether people think that you have something to offer, that they trust and want to be a part of. And I think this is what I very much learned at Mars.
Yeah, it's a wonderful lesson because, of course, we don't always realize that that's what sets a company apart, and that's what we should seek out. Is that sort of, are we appreciated for who we are and what we bring to the table, as opposed to, the narrow skills that we might have. Now another thing about your career, Judith, is that you've lived all over the world, many countries, including my home country of Belgium. Very nice, wonderful. But also the United States, also Austria, obviously the Netherlands, where you still spend much of your time, and Germany, back to Germany recently, when you became a managing board member at Siemens. Would you say that all this expat traveling, global traveling, is it something that you would recommend now to a new generation?
I'm always careful with advice, because I think advice is to some extent a bit paternalistic, or maternalistic, I should say, right? And I think there's just certain things that I would say ring true, in terms of development in general. I think what's most important today than ever before is that we keep on learning. No? So how do we actually embrace something that keeps us on our toes? And that might mean different things for different people. I think the rotations that I had in Mars was one way of keeping me on my toes. Huh? I think it's about learning different perspectives. What we talk about in Siemens is, if we're the ones who combine the real and the digital worlds, how can we make sure that people understand the hardware and the software side? How can we make sure that people see, headquarter and the business from a country perspective? How do you make moves happen across functions or across business units, so that you get a good 360 view on a business and how you operate in different businesses and different cultures. And I think that as a way of looking at a career is always helpful. But I've been around long enough to have seen 9-box grids in which people are plugged for their performance and their potential. And I remember, the ones that had all the potential were the ones that had a lot of learning agility and performed well in first-time situations. Well, but if you need heart surgery, you don't want to be operated on by somebody who performs well in first-time situations. You really want to be operated on by somebody who's a damn good expert in what they do and take great pride in doing that. Yeah? So I therefore think it really depends on the type of career that you choose. And in some areas, deep expertise is exactly what you need and what you want to call for. And there's different businesses as well. If I compare again Mars and Siemens, the Mars family would always say, we don't do rocket science. They were very much in the camp of leadership as a transversal capability, and we just need a few experts in a few areas. Well, Siemens has a bit more technology, so you do want more expertise in certain areas, but you do want what I would call a T profile. People who have a good rooting in one area, but who do understand what happens left and right of them, and who do understand how to read a customer backwards, so that what they do is meaningful.
That's very interesting. I'm going to remember that. People with a T profile. But your explanation has been so compelling, Judith, that I almost forgot what my question was.
I have advice on
which my real question was, would you recommend to people that they also have that international experience? So let me ask you a more narrow question in this regard. Your favorite place that you've worked at, country. What was your favorite country and city that you spent some time in?
We did love Vienna. We did love our time in Vienna.
Wonderful city, yeah.
We did love our time in the US as well, because I had the luxury of being able to walk to work. And I just love the nature around the Potomac as well. And it was a special place to take teenage children to be so close to a place that everybody in the world knows. So we chased Pokemon Goes on our bicycles through Washington, D.C.
Oh, that's amazing. You've really convinced, I think, everybody that Washington, D.C. and Vienna are wonderful places. Although you failed my personal test, Judith, I was hoping you were going to say Belgium. Didn't happen. Too bad. No second chance. We know the truth now. A final question for you, a more personal question for you. So I've looked at the picture of, your managing board, and I've looked at the picture of the managing board of your previous company in the Netherlands, DSM, and twice you really stood out. It wasn't hard. It wasn't rocket science to figure out who you would be in that photo. And one of the reasons, unfortunately, is because you were, in both cases, the only woman on the managing board. How is it, Judith? If we're 2024 and like the people on the call are it's so alien, I think, for so many of them, that gender is still an issue in business or in society at large. But it is. I mean, but how do you then how do you survive and thrive as a woman or as a minority, any kind of minority? In an environment, a corporate environment where most people, alas, still have a different background.
I have to make a point for DSM, because when I was there, the executive committee actually did
Actually
have
that was
almost
true. Sorry,
parity. Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's true. That's
But
true.
and I think at just after I left, they might have had even one woman more than men
So there are
on the
places
executive
where
committee.
we have achieved that.
There are clearly places where it works. I think when I chose to join Siemens, that didn't even occur to me. That the question of how many women. I was more interested in how international
I
Siemens
see.
is and how diverse the thinking on the board. And I joined because I really loved where the CEO, who also was the then new CEO, he was just taking over, where Roland wanted to take the company. And I had the chance to speak with my colleagues on the board as well. And I think we're very different people, but we have very similar ideas on where we want to take the company and the values by which we want to lead. And that has worked really, really well for us, and it's worked really, really, really well for me. Because at the end of the day, I want to be, in a place where I can have impact. I want to be in a place where my opinion counts. Not more or not less than others, but where my opinion counts. And where I feel that there's a team that I'm truly part of, and Siemens ticks all those boxes, and so that works for me. But your point is a serious point. We still have far too many women in important leadership positions, and that is hard work to change. Is one of our KPIs in the degree program, and it's one that I'm glad we've reached 2 years ahead of time. Yeah, we wanted to have 30% top management females by 2025. We're now at 31.3, 2 years ahead of time. But it is hard work to change that, and it is particularly hard work to change that in a company that relies very much on people with a STEM background,
STEM,
where
science,
you
technology,
typically find
engineering.
less females, exactly,
In
science,
the
technology, engineering, maths. Yeah. So that is not an excuse, but that is a challenge, and so therefore we've rolled out a gender equity program across Siemens, so that we're not just managing the top, but that we really understand what the drivers are across the organization. And when we had a look, we see that in all the enabling functions, we're actually at parity: communications, marketing, finance, procurement. You name
right.
it. But in the core functions where we typically have technologists starting, this is where we're challenged, and this is where we still have work to do.
Yeah, it's an ongoing issue. It's unfortunate, but we can understand from how you approach it that there's also explanations, and therefore there's also levers of change. I want to make sure we get to some questions from the audience, Judith.
Yeah.
Our wonderful audience that's here with us. I want to start perhaps with Dimitri. Dimitri, who is in Barcelona, sunny Barcelona, he said, who's doing a master's in finance. And he would like to ask you, I think, something about your people-related role. Dimitri, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Really appreciative of this opportunity. Unfortunately, Barcelona not that sunny how it's supposed to be, but still. I checked your CV as well, especially on the LinkedIn, and you spent 20 years in Mars. That's impressive. And how I understood, you spend most of your time connected to the human resources. And right now in Siemens, you've been working on the CPSO position for almost like 5 years, which is really impressive as well. But still, if we come to my question is like, for the past decade, job hopping became very popular. And what does Siemens have some special techniques or upcoming programs to solve this problem? Because, for instance, in Germany, is regular years of changing job is like divided by 2 or maybe even 6 years. Or, for instance, in America, it's a more particular date is 4.1 year. So, or do you think it's more an advantage of Siemens to have a mobility of the employees? Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitri.
Yeah, that's a complex question. So let me try and chew that off as best I can. So if I stick out my big thumb, I would say an attrition rate of anything between 8 and 12%, all in. Yeah? People who leave you voluntarily, people that leave on retirement, people that you sometimes lose also through restructuring. 8 to 12% is probably healthy, because you do want a certain level of turnover, yeah, to keep an organization fresh in terms of in terms of thought and diversity. In Germany, our stats are much lower than that. So we lose people at max 5%. Most of that is retirement. Our voluntary turnover is 1.5%. Yeah? And if I come back to your gender question, Peter, that is also why changing the gender setup in a country like Germany is actually really hard, because I would have to stop recruiting men entirely and only recruit women in to really get a degree of change. And of course, nobody would do that, yeah? And would approve of that. There are other countries where that is obviously very different. And we have very different types of people working for us. We have people who work on the shop floor, we have software developers, we have engineers, we have great finance people, no? And of course, there's also differences by job groups and by country. In India, interestingly enough, particularly fueled by the pandemic, you see a relatively high turnover and people who do a lot of CV building as well. And we know we need to get them through the 2-year mark. Yeah. So, and once people are with us for 3.5, they typically stay. But there is something around CV building. There are areas where, in a certain plant in the US, where we figured out that we have actually really high turnover in our very new joiners in a certain plant, and we learned that with the pandemic, lots of companies had started to set up in the neighborhood. So it became a really fierce competition for talent that hadn't been there for long and who were very, I would say, open to just, you know, $1 more on the hourly wage.
Right.
But for most of it, we have people who are with us actually for quite a long time.
It's the opposite problem that you have.
It's almost the opposite problem that we have, and it's important to us. Yeah, it's important to us that people have a good experience working with us. We look at things like engagement scores, and we also try to understand not just the big number for Siemens, but really also what is the distribution. Where are teams who are doing an exceptional job in terms of engagement, but where do we also have teams that live in a bad place and live in a bad place for longer? And this is where we drill in and want to understand what's happening in those teams.
It's fascinating because, you know, it turns out that, like, one of those global trends, this is not always indicative of what happens at the more enterprise level. And thank you for highlighting that. Now, you mentioned India, and we happen to have a student from India with us, probably many, but one of them is Ria Chopra, who in fact she shared with us in India right now, even though she normally is in Munich. And Ria, you have a question that is, I suppose, geared a little bit more towards finance because you study finance at EU.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Peter. Hi, Judith.
Hi,
my question to you is, like you mentioned, like you have partnerships with the language models with Microsoft. So are there any other innovative financing models or partnerships that Siemens has explored to accelerate the sustainability agenda, particularly in the renewable energy area or circular economy initiatives?
Yeah, no, partnerships are becoming increasingly important for us on a number of fronts. We do a lot with partners also in the sales motion. Yeah? So we do a lot of partnering also with distributors. And if I look at the big distributors, they become quite demanding around sustainability as well. If you go to people like Rexel and Sonepar, they are also saying, "What are you doing, Siemens? Yeah, how green are your products? What are you doing?" And if they're green, you know, then give me a description of how green they are, so I can market that to my customers as well. So we've started to do eco labels also with the help of customers, to understand what is information that is relevant for them and for their customers, as an example. we have worked with, because we have enabling technology, yeah? So we work with customers in many different industries, and sometimes they use our products to set a certain standard. So I'll give you an example. We've developed something that is called Green, where you can really, with blockchain technology, track the actual footprint of a product rather than making assumptions. And we have been working with the chemical industry, and 45 big chemical companies around the world have set Green as their standard, so that they can actually exchange information through the same kind of product and technology, and they have aligned on this as a standard. Then there are other areas where we're trying to understand what we can do better from a procurement perspective. Yeah, so how can we procure better, and how can we also find partnerships in the procurement of let's say things like green steel, hydrogen, and of course we procure green energy where we can't produce that ourselves. So we have invested in photovoltaic, etc. But of course, we haven't been able to do that totally self-sufficient yet. So we are also, on the procurement side, procuring these things. What I find really interesting, and I'm coming back to something I said earlier. Typically, the things that we have to do, our customers want to do as well, and we're using that all with our technology. So we have, out of the many business units that we have 8 who create products. So they are now using our digital twin to optimize for cost, for quality, and for sustainability. And so they are now doing exactly the thing that we're also selling to our customers. And one of the last things that I would say is, when you get to decarbonization, most people already understand that quite well, and we already see a lot of partnerships going on in this area. When you get to circularity, I think this will become even more important, because that will change how entire industries will work.
Set up.
And we think that, again, we need to understand how we can best enable that through our technology.
That's fascinating. Thank you for those examples. Thank you, Ria, for that question, because it really enlightens how Siemens, not Siemens, how it works. A lot of people are interested in this topic. Also, Michal Richter, who is Polish-Canadian. And in fact, in my country, he's based in my city now, Geneva. Also a question about sustainability, I think, Michal.
Yeah. So I get pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining us. I imagine that there's probably some amount of differentiation between industries. So what would you say is a sector that can be most challenging as far as sustainability initiatives, and what can the public maybe do to push organizations to incorporate more sustainability into their long-term strategies?
Yeah, I think there's companies whose whole raison d'être so far has been to sell oil and gas. Yeah, and of course that in the context of is a challenge. Yeah, but what we see is that that also those companies have started a journey on trying to decarbonize their current business, and at the same time starting to transition into things that are more renewable. Now, how quickly they will be on that journey, because there's still a lot of money in oil and gas, not just for these companies, but also for the capital markets, will partly depend on the regulator, on the regulator and the pathways that countries have set themselves. But we see a lot of those oil and gas companies being active on that front, and there's a lot of a philosophical debate about on the entire question of who do you do business with, and what is good business and what is bad business. And I think we need to take very seriously the sectors that are hard to abate. Take steel. The world needs steel, but it consumes enormous amounts of energy. So, but we will not be able to do without steel in the future. So I think the conversation is more about how much more steel can you recycle, how much more green steel can you get through hydrogen rather than through coal and gas-fired plants. So I think rather than just investing in something that is green from the very beginning, I think we also need to pay attention to where are hard to abate sectors and how can we at least help transition them to something that is much greener and much less emittent than it is today, if we want to land anywhere near the 1.5 degrees by 2030, because the technology to land there is there. I think a lot of the big innovations are needed between 2030 and 2050, but there is a lot of sectors who can do a lot already today, but for some it's just really harder to find that nexus of having a successful business model and being green, or at least much greener.
Right. Not everyone is yet where Siemens already is. Like your comments have sparked so many questions and comments from our students. Unfortunately, we're not going to get to all of them. I just want to tip my hat to a few people that also wanted to ask you questions about this. For example, Andre Joste in Switzerland wanted to ask you about, how can companies help support regional policy development when it comes to ESG. Claudio Latterer, he was interested in corporate social responsibility, as well as how you deal with privacy concerns. You see, like you're really generating a lot of questions. And Nima Mutemi, who's joining us from Nairobi, which is amazing. Welcome to you. Wanted to know about your Africa strategy. I mean, like there's so many different topics that we want to address. Thank you for talking about all sustainability so much. I want to make sure, though, that we get on a final question from one of our students, Lusajo, who comes from Tanzania, but is in Munich, the one person who's in Munich. And he's got a question about the topic that everyone also wants to ask you about, which, of course, is AI. Lusajo, over to you.
Okay, let's see whether I can answer that.
Thank you, Peter, for the wonderful introduction. Hi, Judith. Thank you for joining us here today. So you did mention employing over 1,400 experts in AI, and that is wonderful. And that just proves that the evolution of AI will continue. Now, however, AI applications and the technology behind it use more resources, for example, electricity. So what would you say is your view on the evolution of AI, and how can we mitigate its effects on resources so that it becomes a more sustainable tool? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good question. I mean, first of all, AI is a tool that can put, if you allow me the flippant language, that put on steroids, everything that is already there today. So for us, it means wherever we can make a contribution to a decarbonization, a resource efficiency and energy efficiency journey of customers today, AI allows us to do this even faster, to do this more efficiently, to do this even faster. So I think in many regards, AI has, to use the language of earlier, has a handprint. So with AI, you can have actually a lot of positive impact. I think what you're referring to as well is that more and more electricity gets consumed. One of our booming industries also, in Siemens, in terms of customers, is data centers, and they're very aware of that. They're very aware of the obligations that they have as a growing industry to also make sure that they are manageable from a footprint perspective of the world. And so therefore they look very heavily into energy usage, of course, and a lot of them we can help with our technology to heavily reduce their energy load. Water is a big thing for them. Cooling is a big thing for them. What do they do with the heat, and how do they cool down their machines, and how can you use technology again to make sure those are systems that come with a minimal footprint, and the technology again is there. But of course they also consume land space from a biodiversity perspective. You build more concrete where previously there maybe wasn't something, so more buildings are needed for data centers. But these industries are very well aware of that, and again they're making a lot of use of technology to make sure that they minimize their footprint.
Well, Judith, thank you. It shows to us that AI is not only a powerful tool, in terms of technology, but that it can go hand in hand with the quest for sustainability. That's a difficult challenge. Unfortunately, Judith, our time with you is up, which makes me very sad. But one final question, which I hope you can answer in 10 seconds. It's one from Claudio Latterer, and he asks, can you ask Judith what is her favorite book, or what book has had the greatest personal impact on her or professional life? Can she recommend it? Can you recommend a book that you find very impactful?
Peter Block, the answer to how is yes.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. Great.
So that's a 10-second answer.
That's right. That's right. You know, we have to make sure we keep track of your recommendation, and we can find the book, and we can read it. We can then learn more about you through that book. But for now, we want to thank you, Judith, for the time that you've spent with us. It was extremely fascinating. We've learned a lot about you. We've learned a lot about the business that you work for, and about sort of the journey that you're on. I think it's inspired us all. And so from us to you, a big thank you. And wishing you all the best, and hopefully our students can help, some of our students can help you and Siemens in the future with the challenges that you're working on. But for now, thank you for sharing this time with us, and good luck.
Yeah, no, that would be wonderful. And have a good evening, everybody, and have a good and successful rest of study.
Thank you. And then maybe a last word for Claire as we close off this program.
Right, well, thanks, Peter. Thank you ever so much for joining us, Judith. I'm sure everybody's enjoyed so much. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for championing sustainability at Siemens. A very insightful conference, which I'm sure has inspired so many of us. So thank you. I hope to see you one day, perhaps on campus. It would be great to have you here in person. And for the rest of the audience, thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for our next Learning from Leaders conferences. So thank you and goodbye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.